That is a fact. But in Christ, all will be made alive. Father, for our loved ones who have gone on before us, the saved, they're still alive. They're just separated from their body right now. Their bodies are in the cemetery, but their spirits, their souls are with you. And Lord, when you come back, Jesus, you're bringing...
The man who built an empire from duck calls sat in his Louisiana cabin, staring at a photograph he couldn't recognize. Phil Robertson, the patriarch who commanded millions of viewers every Wednesday night, now struggled to remember his own son's name. The beard was still there, wild and untamed, but behind those eyes that once sparkled with mischief and wisdom, something precious was slipping away, one memory at a time. But how did we get here? How did America's most beloved backwoods philosopher go from ruling reality television to fighting a battle he couldn't win? And what does this mean for the millions of families facing the same devastating diagnosis? Picture this. It's a humid Louisiana morning in 1972. A young Phil Robertson stands waist-deep in swamp water, frustration etched across his weathered face. He'd been trying to call ducks with store-bought calls that sounded about as authentic as a city slicker trying to speak Cajun. The ducks weren't buying it, and neither was Phil. There's got to be a better way, he muttered to himself, trudging back through the cypress trees toward his modest home. Little did he know that this moment of frustration would birth a multi-million-dollar empire. But here's what most people don't know about Phil Robertson's early years. Have you ever wondered what drives a man to abandon a promising football career at Louisiana Tech to chase ducks in the swamp? Phil had been offered a starting quarterback position, ahead of a guy named Terry Bradshaw. Yes, that Terry Bradshaw who went on to win 4 Super Bowl rings with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But Phil made a choice that would define his entire life philosophy. He chose authenticity over accolades, swamp over stadiums, faith over fame. Night after night, Phil worked in his shed, carving, testing, and perfecting what would become the Duck Commander call. His hands, already calloused from years of outdoor labor, grew raw from the endless hours of crafting. Kay would bring him coffee at midnight, finding him hunched over his workbench, wood shavings scattered like confetti around his feet. "Phil," she'd say softly, "it's past midnight again." "Just one more adjustment, Kay." "I'm close. I can feel it." But what was he really chasing? Was it just a better duck call, or was it something deeper? Think about it. How many times have you been so passionate about something that you lost track of time completely? That was Phil Robertson every single night for months. The breakthrough came on a foggy October morning in 1973. Phil tested his latest creation as the sun crept over the bayou. The sound that emerged was so realistic, so perfectly crafted, that within minutes, mallards were circling overhead, convinced they'd found their flock. Phil's whoops of joy echoed across the water, and Kay, watching from their back porch, knew their lives had just changed forever. But success didn't come overnight. Can you imagine trying to convince sporting goods stores to carry a duck call made by some unknown guy from the Louisiana swamps? Phil loaded his beat-up truck with handmade calls and drove from store to store, demonstration after demonstration. Most store owners looked at this wild-haired, bearded man with skepticism. "Sir, we already have duck calls," they'd say politely. "But have you heard one that actually works?" Phil would counter, pulling out his creation. The first store to place an order was in Monroe, Louisiana. The owner, initially reluctant, agreed to buy a dozen calls after Phil's demonstration brought every dog in the neighborhood running, thinking there were actual ducks nearby. That dozen calls sold out in 2 days. Word spread through the hunting community like wildfire. Hunters would drive hours to get their hands on a genuine Phil Robertson Duck Commander call. By 1975, Phil had to hire his first employee, his eldest son, Alan. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn that most fans never knew about. Alan was fresh out of college, full of business ideas and modernization plans. He wanted to expand, to mass produce, to take Duck Commander national immediately. But Phil had different ideas. Do you know what Phil told his son that changed everything? "Son, if we make 1 million of these calls, every single one better sound like I carved it myself in our shed. The day we sacrifice quality for quantity is the day we stop being Duck Commander." This philosophy would become the foundation not just of their business, but of their family legacy. Phil insisted that every call be hand-tuned, every product personally approved. He'd test random calls from each batch, and if even one didn't meet his standards, the entire batch would be reworked. The 1980s brought challenges that would have broken lesser men. The economy struggled, hunting regulations changed, and bigger companies tried to copy Phil's designs with cheaper materials. There were months when the Robertson family wasn't sure they could pay their bills. Phil worked 16-hour days. Kay took on seamstress work to make ends meet, and the boys learned the value of every penny. But here's what's remarkable about Phil Robertson. And ask yourself this question as I tell you. When was the last time you saw someone stick to their principles when everything was falling apart around them? Phil refused to compromise. When a major sporting goods chain offered to buy Duck Commander for a significant sum, but wanted to move production overseas and change the design, Phil didn't hesitate. "Not for sale," he said simply. "Not if it means changing who we are." Willie Robertson often tells a story about finding his father in the workshop at 3 a.m. during those tough times, not working on duck calls, but on his knees praying. When Willie asked what he was praying for, Phil's answer revealed everything about the man he was. "I'm not asking God to make our business successful, son. I'm asking him to help us stay faithful, no matter what happens to the business." The tide began to turn in the late 1980s when professional hunting guides discovered Duck Commander calls. These weren't weekend warriors or casual hunters. These were men whose livelihoods depended on their ability to call in ducks for paying customers. When the pros started swearing by Phil's calls, demand exploded. By the 1990s, Duck Commander had grown from Phil's shed operation to a legitimate manufacturing facility. But Phil insisted on maintaining the personal touch. He still hand-tested calls, still insisted on the highest quality materials, and still made decisions based on his gut rather than spreadsheets. But success brought its own challenges. As the boys grew up and joined the family business, each brought their own personalities and ideas. Willie, the natural businessman, with his college education and big dreams. Jace, the perfectionist who inherited Phil's obsession with quality. Jep, the creative one who saw possibilities everywhere. And Alan, the eldest, who balanced ministry with business. The workshop that had once been Phil's solitary sanctuary became a bustling hub of activity, voices, and sometimes heated discussions. Can you imagine what it was like when 4 strong-willed Robertson men tried to make business decisions together? Phil established what became known as Robertson rules for family meetings. Rule number 1, we argue about business, never about family. Rule number 2, every decision gets made with a prayer first. Rule number 3, if we can't agree, the old man gets the final say. And rule number 4, which became legendary among the family, nobody leaves mad and nobody goes home without a hug. These weren't just cute family sayings. These rules held the Robertson family together through expansion, success, conflicts, and eventually the pressure of fame that would come with Duck Dynasty. The call that changed everything came in 2011. A television producer had heard about this colorful Louisiana family that made duck calls and lived like throwbacks to a simpler time. The producer spent a day with the Robertsons and knew immediately he'd found something special. Not just a business story, but a family story that America was hungry for. But here's what you might not know. Phil Robertson almost said no to Duck Dynasty. The man who would become reality TV's most unlikely star was reluctant to let cameras into his family's private world. What finally convinced him? And how did this decision change not just their fame and fortune, but ultimately lead to the heartbreaking battle he's fighting today? Willie recalls the family meeting where they discussed the TV opportunity. Phil sat quietly while his sons debated the pros and cons, the potential impact on their business, their privacy, their way of life. Finally, Phil spoke up with a question that silenced the room. Will this help us share our faith with more people? When the answer was yes, Phil's decision was made. Then we do it, but we do it our way. No scripts telling us what to believe. No producers changing who we are. We share our lives, our faith, and our family exactly as we are. Or we don't do it at all. The first episode of Duck Dynasty aired on A&E on March 21st, 2012. The network hoped for decent ratings, maybe enough to justify a second season. What they got was a cultural phenomenon that nobody saw coming. The premiere drew 1.8 million viewers, impressive for a cable show. But by the 4th season, Duck Dynasty was pulling in nearly 12 million viewers per episode, making it one of the most watched reality shows in television history. Phil Robertson, the reluctant star, became America's grandfather. His pre-meal prayers, his old-fashioned wisdom, his unfiltered observations about modern life resonated with millions of families who felt like they'd lost something in our fast-paced, technology-driven world.